3D printing, it's used extensively in the aerospace industry. Companies will also be using it to tackle a problem here on Earth. Brexit, for example. We'll explain that in a moment. First, the technology behind Stratasys, one of the world's biggest 3D printing companies. It's turning 30. Now, before we meet the CEO who will be with me, Andy Middleton, or the executive president for Europe, Andy Middleton will be here, we had to see exactly how it works. So we took over a large part of the newsroom.
This machine is printing a 3D file which has been created by a design engineer anywhere in the world.
Which essentially means making something like this.
It's making something like this in engineering-grade plastics.
How long will it take to make something?
This particular model is one of our smaller models. We have models which are 10 times the build size. In this model, if you take that part you have there, that would take about 3 hours.
About 3 hours?
About 3 hours.
Right. So it's not exactly speedy, but at the same time, this is a revolution. But what is the revolution?
The revolution is that instead of or manufacturing tens or hundreds or thousands of that part and shipping them to the places where they are needed, we can actually send the data and print them exactly where they are needed.
The reality is, traditional manufacturing has economies of scale within it. So if you need 1,000 of these,
yes,
you're going to produce them in the traditional way, surely.
It depends. It depends on what those costs are. If you want to have precisely the amount without any obsolete inventory after the normal manufacturing process, it may be better to have them 3D printed.
How quickly can this machine be reprogrammed from making pipes to making widgets to making bits?
On the fly. On the fly. For the printer, it's completely irrelevant which part it's printing. And while it's printing this one, it's already got the data set for the next widget.
Right, but you must need to put new molds in.
The materials are stored down here,
right,
on a filament. You can change those filaments if you require different characteristics.
So, what are these?
These are armrests, which are used in commercial aircraft.
Right, well, why is it better to make them this way than the traditional, which is injection moulding? You can make them quickly, cheaply.
Sure. If you do them traditionally, they are all the same. The costs of setting up an injection moulding machine are phenomenal. However, if you only need 200, or if Delta and Lufthansa and Singapore Airlines need them slightly different, then this is where 3D printing comes in, because it's irrelevant of what the design is on a 3D printing machine, and it's not on an injection moulding machine.
I see no ships. This is another thing that it made. Joining me is Andy Middleton. Good to see you, sir. The long and short of it is, how far are we into the revolution? Because on this programme, about 6 or 7 years ago, just over there, we printed some little child's rubber duck or something. I mean, a plastic, really small little toy. Yes. At the forefront. Took about 3 weeks, and right, the programme was off the air by the end. Now you're making these in a matter of hours. But how far is this revolution along the way?
We've moved on from rubber ducks. These parts, which are today in commercial aircraft, there's over 50,000 3D printed parts flying around as we speak in aircraft of a commercial nature. So we've moved on tremendously since rubber ducks.
Right. And as we've moved on, in terms of the total revolution, where do you think we are in the process? Are we just beginning to see its potential, or do we have a pretty good grasp on what it can do?
We've had a great grasp on prototyping, which was what 3D printing was used. Now we've moved into manufacturing, and particularly aviation, aerospace, and automotive. Those are the two which are pioneering the adoption in manufacturing.
But you're saying, of course, this could help in Brexit.
It could help in
How?
Brexit. Quite simple. I was just arrived this morning coming in from Germany, and the whole line of trucks queuing up to get into the country before Brexit. Instead of shipping goods, parts and components by truck, ship, let's send the data and print it where it's needed.
Indeed. But those machines are expensive, and you'll need lots of them. If it takes, what, 5 or 6 hours to make one?
Yes.
And I need 10,000.
Right.
Then those machines, admittedly, they can go day or night, but you're talking about having to have dozens of these machines to get a production run in a reasonable time.
Even dozens of those machines save so much money on logistics and physical inventory. So we're saying keep your inventory digital, not physical, and send those files, have them printed and manufactured when and where you need them.
Is it inevitably going to be for niche products of high value that justify the... Now, I know that sounds stupid when I'm talking about a toilet pipe or a ventilation thing, but this is a toilet pipe or a ventilation thing for an aircraft. So it's actually, you know, got a lot of fire retardant properties. It's not cheap.
It's not cheap, but it meets all of the criteria that the aerospace require.
Right. So is this ultimately going to be for... And there again, this is...
an armrest.
This is another, the armrests.
Yes.
Is there any limitations on 3D printing?
None whatsoever. When we're talking geometry, 3D printing is the only technology that can actually print, create and manufacture a geometry without any limitations in comparison to today's conventional, where the people design parts today based on how they can manufacture.
And the idea of using them within aircraft,
yes,
of course, certainly within the aircraft part, but those requiring metal parts,
yes,
or aluminium parts,
yes,
now you're into a bit of trouble.
I don't think we are. Today, the 3D printing technology is already producing aluminium, titanium, and different alloys. And going forward, you will see new technologies also.
What can't it do?
What can't it do?
Yes.
It can't print today 10,000 pieces in an hour or in 5 hours. But what it can do is print those pieces where you need them instead of shipping them around the world. And I think, you know, the logistic costs are destined for, what, 10 trillion in 2020? Now, that's a lot of money, which the consumer is paying for.
I will appreciate it when it can make a decent cup of tea. Good to see you, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.